Why I regretted moving to a nursing home, 6 truths nobody tells you. Everything seemed fine until the day I walked through that door. Why I regretted moving to a nursing home, 6 truths nobody tells you, isn't just a title, it's a warning. What I experienced there has nothing to do with care or comfort, but with silence, erasure, and loss. And if you think you know what happens in these places, wait until you hear the 4th truth. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Let's continue. The alarm went off at 6 in the morning, as always. Martha opened her eyes and for a moment forgot where she was. The white ceiling and personality-less walls brought her back to reality. 3 months. It had been 3 months since she first walked through the door of Hope Haven, carrying only a suitcase and the weight of a decision she still wasn't sure had been hers. She sat up on the narrow bed and observed the small room she now called home. The laminate dresser, the metal closet, the plastic chair by the window, everything impeccably clean, everything rigorously identical. Through the window, she could see the inner courtyard where some plants bravely resisted the surrounding concrete. They were the only living things that seemed to have a choice in that place. The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor made her get up. Routine was calling. Breakfast at 7, medications at 7:30, activities at 9. A schedule that worked like a Swiss clock, but never consulted the hands of anyone's heart. Martha put on the blue robe that all residents wore and walked toward the dining hall. In the corridor, she crossed paths with Betty, a white-haired lady who always walked slowly, supporting herself against the wall. Her eyes, once bright according to the photographs her daughter had left, now looked like foggy glass. Martha waved, but Betty didn't respond. She was talking to herself, whispering words that only she understood. The dining hall buzzed with the controlled movement of morning. Staff distributed trays with military precision, watery coffee, bread with margarine, a slice of white cheese. Martha sat at her usual table next to Jack, a former engineer who spent his days calculating works he would never build again. "Good morning, Jack," Martha greeted, trying to break the silence that always hung over meals. He raised his eyes from the imaginary calculations he was scribbling on a napkin. "Martha, my dear, did you know this building has structural problems? Look over there, see that crack in the wall? In 5 years, maybe less, this will—" But Martha was no longer listening. Her eyes were fixed on the entrance to the dining hall, where an unfamiliar woman had just appeared. She was different from all the other residents. She wore a floral dress in shades of purple and yellow, carried a colorful bag, and had something in her eyes that Martha hadn't seen in a long time around there. Life. The newcomer looked around with curiosity, not with the lost look that most developed after a few weeks in the place. She walked with determined steps to the table where Martha was sitting and asked, "May I sit here?" "I'm Helen. I arrived last night." Martha nodded positively, intrigued. Helen didn't seem to fit the pattern of the place. While everyone spoke quietly or remained silent, she commented on the decoration, complimented the coffee despite it being watery, and asked about the routine with genuine curiosity. "Do you have a library here?" asked Helen, biting her bread with appetite. "Yes, we do," Martha replied, "but almost nobody uses it. It's on the 2nd floor." "Great, I love reading. I brought some books with me, but it's always good to have more options." Helen smiled, and Martha realized she had forgotten what it was like to see a genuine smile. After breakfast, during the mandatory walk in the courtyard, Martha observed Helen interacting with other residents. She didn't just greet them, but initiated conversations, asked their names, wanted to know their stories. Most responded with monosyllables or just nodded, but some, like Teresa, who hadn't spoken for weeks, even managed to sketch smiles. During activity time, Helen joined the crafts group. While most mechanically followed the occupational therapist's instructions, she made suggestions, proposed variations, transformed the simple manual work into something creative. Martha, who participated in activities just to pass the time, found herself really paying attention for the first time in months. "How about we do something different today?" Helen suggested to the therapist. "We could each make something that represents who we are, not just follow the model." The therapist, Carla, was a bit disconcerted. Routine was sacred there. But something in Helen's enthusiasm made her agree. "Well, I think we can try something new." Martha observed Helen's hands working. She was creating something that looked like a miniature garden, using fabric scraps and pieces of styrofoam. "I always had plants at home," Helen explained. "I miss them." That simple phrase echoed in Martha like a bell. She missed things too, missed her rose bushes, the vegetable garden she cultivated in her backyard, the fresh herbs she harvested for cooking, missed being who she had always been. At lunch, Helen sat next to Martha again. "You're a teacher, aren't you?" she asked, as if she knew something that Martha hadn't even mentioned. "How did you figure that out?" "By the way you observe everything, as if you're always learning something new. And your hands, they have calluses from writing on the board so much." Martha looked at her own hands, surprised. It had been so long since anyone had really observed her that she had forgotten she still carried marks of the life she had lived. "I was a literature teacher for 35 years, she said, and her voice sounded different as she pronounced those words, as if she were introducing herself for the first time in a long time. "Literature, how wonderful. I bet you have incredible stories to tell." Martha felt something stir in her chest. Stories, yes, she had stories, thousands of them. Not just from the books she had taught, but from the life she had built, the students she had inspired, the discoveries she had made. When had she stopped seeing herself as someone with stories to tell? In the afternoon, during rest period, Martha headed to the library. It had been weeks since she'd gone up to the second floor. The environment was dusty, with books organized but visibly seldom handled. That's where she found Helen, already installed in one of the few comfortable chairs reading a novel. "I thought I'd find you here," said Helen, without raising her eyes from the book. "What do you mean?" "People who were literature teachers have a special relationship with libraries. It's like they're magnets." Martha smiled. "You seem to know a lot about people." "Actually, I just pay attention. Most people stop doing that when they get older, as if curiosity were a childish thing." Helen closed the book and looked directly at Martha. "But you still have curiosity in your eyes, it's just hidden." That afternoon, for the first time in months, Martha stayed in the library beyond the permitted time. She leafed through books, read some poems, allowed herself to remember why she loved words so much. Helen stayed by her side, sometimes reading, sometimes just observing the afternoon movement through the window. When they went down for dinner, Martha realized that something had changed. She couldn't explain what it was, but she felt as if a door that had been locked for a long time had begun to open slightly. And all because of that strange woman who had arrived with colorful dresses and questions that no one else asked. During the night, lying in her bed, Martha looked at the white ceiling she knew by heart and realized that for the first time in 3 months, she wasn't thinking about how all days were the same. She was thinking about tomorrow, about what book she would choose in the library, about what story Helen might like to hear. Maybe it was just an illusion, but Martha felt that something important was about to happen. Helen's second week at Hope Haven brought subtle but noticeable changes. Martha woke up earlier, not out of obligation, but out of anxiety to meet her new friend. There was something contagious about Helen's energy that made the days seem less predictable. That Thursday morning, Martha found Helen in the courtyard, watering the plants with a watering can that no one knew where it had come from. The garden, previously forgotten and dried up, showed signs of new life. "Did you steal that watering can from the gardening stuff?" Martha asked, feigning seriousness. Helen laughed. "I didn't steal anything. I borrowed it indefinitely. These plants were crying for help." She pointed to a small flower bed where some flowers were beginning to bloom. "You know, Martha, plants are like people. They need attention to flourish." It was a simple observation, but it hit Martha hard. How many years had it been since someone had given her genuine attention? Not the professional attention of caregivers, but the kind that sees beyond basic needs, that sees the person behind the age. After breakfast, the two headed to the library. It had become a silent ritual. Helen always brought a different book, and Martha always chose something she hadn't read in years. That day, Martha picked up a volume of Clarice Lispector that was dusty on the shelf. "Good choice," commented Helen. "Clarice always knew how to translate the most complex feelings. You know her well?" "Know is a strong word, but I read her a lot when I was younger. There was a phrase of hers that always struck me. Being happy is recognizing that life is worth living, despite all the challenges." Martha flipped through the book until she found the chronicle, The Discovery of the World. She began to read in a low voice, and Helen moved closer to listen. It was the first time in months that Martha had read to someone, and the sensation of sharing words brought back memories of her classes when she saw interest shining in the students' eyes. "You have a beautiful reading voice," said Helen when Martha finished the passage. I bet your students loved your classes. Some loved them, others tolerated them, Martha smiled. But I loved teaching. Each text was a new discovery, even after years of reading the same works. And why did you stop? The question caught Martha off guard. No one in the home had asked about her previous life in such a direct way. Age, mainly. Mandatory retirement arrived and, well, then came the loneliness at home. The small accidents, the worried family. Worried family, repeated Helen, in a tone that Martha couldn't decipher. I understand. There was something in the way Helen spoke that aroused Martha's curiosity. And you? How did you end up here? Helen was quiet for a moment, looking out the window. Oh, my story is similar to yours. Worried family, empty house, the feeling of being a burden. She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. Sometimes I wonder if we didn't accept these decisions too quickly. That afternoon, during the craft activity, Helen proposed something different again. How about if each of us told a story while we work? True stories from our lives. Carla, the therapist, hesitated. Unscheduled activities always made her uncomfortable. But Helen's enthusiasm was irresistible, and she ended up agreeing. Jack was the first. He talked about building a bridge in a small town 40 years ago. His eyes sparkled as he described the calculations, the challenges, the satisfaction of seeing cars passing over something he had helped create. Martha realized it was the first time she had seen him truly animated since his arrival. Teresa, who hardly spoke, whispered that she had been a seamstress. Her hands, now trembling, had once created wedding dresses that made women feel like princesses. Each dress was unique, she said, touching the craft fabric delicately. Like each woman, when Martha's turn came, she felt her heart race. I taught literature, as I've already said, but there was something special. Once a year I organized a soiree at the school. Students brought their own poems, music, theater. Her voice came alive as she spoke. It was magical to see young people discovering they had a voice, that their words mattered. Helen listened with complete attention. And here, do you miss teaching? I miss all of it, admitted Martha. But mostly I miss feeling that I can still make a difference in someone's life. Who said you can't? The question hung in the air. Carla announced the end of the activity, but no one moved immediately. There was a different energy in the room, as if each person had rediscovered a piece of themselves that had been forgotten. That night, Martha couldn't sleep. Helen's words echoed in her mind. Who said you can't? It was true. Who had said she couldn't make a difference anymore? She had passively accepted that her usefulness had ended with retirement, that her value as a person was tied only to memories of the past. The next day, Martha woke up with an idea. During breakfast, she looked for Helen. You mentioned that you like to read, she said. How about we organize something like a book club here? Helen's eyes lit up. Are you serious? Completely. It doesn't have to be elaborate. We could choose a book, read together, discuss. Maybe others would be interested. Martha, that's brilliant. When do we start? They decided to talk to the administration first. The director, Sylvia, an efficient woman but not fond of changes in routine, received the proposal with skepticism. Do you think the residents are interested in something like this? She asked, looking over her glasses. We won't know until we try, replied Helen naturally. But yesterday in the craft activity, everyone got excited when we started telling stories. People want to connect, they want to feel alive. Martha added, it would be just once a week in the library, no extra costs using the books that are already there. Sylvia sighed. Well, if it doesn't interfere with the routine of other activities, you can try. The approval, even if reluctant, filled Martha with an energy she hadn't felt in a long time. She and Helen spent the afternoon in the library, choosing the first book. They decided on Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, a simple and captivating story. Let's make posters to advertise, suggested Helen, with childish enthusiasm. Posters? Martha laughed. Helen, we're not children organizing a school party anymore. So what? Why should age prevent us from having fun like children? The question was simple but provocative. Martha realized that somehow she had internalized the idea that fun was a thing for young people, that people her age should be content with appropriate and dignified entertainment. That afternoon, the two made colorful posters with paper and pens that Helen had indefinitely borrowed from the activity room. They spread them through the corridors, in the dining hall, in the TV room. Book Club. Come rediscover the pleasure of stories. Fridays, 3 p.m. Library. The first meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. Martha felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. It had been a long time since she had organized something, since she had taken initiative. Helen had awakened in her a part that she thought was asleep forever. On the eve of the first meeting, Martha lay down thinking about how her life had changed in just 2 weeks. Helen's arrival hadn't transformed the home, but it had transformed the way she saw her possibilities within that place. Maybe she couldn't physically leave, but she could choose how to live emotionally. For the first time since she arrived, Martha fell asleep smiling, anxious for what tomorrow would bring. Friday arrived with a fine rain that left the library windows foggy. Martha arrived half an hour before the scheduled time, carrying the copies of Pride and Prejudice that she had set aside. Her heart beat as if she were giving her first class again. Helen appeared a few minutes later, bringing a tray with tea and cookies that she had gotten from the kitchen. "I thought a snack would make everything more welcoming," she explained, arranging the chairs in a circle. At 2:45, no one had appeared yet. Martha began to feel that familiar sense of failure that had pursued her since she arrived at the home. Maybe it was too presumptuous to think that anyone would be interested. "They'll come," said Helen, noticing her friend's anxiety. "Sometimes people need courage to accept new things." Exactly at 3 o'clock, Jack appeared at the door, hesitant. "Is it still possible to participate?" he asked, holding a copy of the book. "Of course, come in, choose a chair," said Martha, her voice laden with relief and joy. A few minutes later, Teresa arrived, accompanied by a lady whom Martha didn't know well, Anne. Gradually, the library filled up. 8 people showed up in total, more than Martha had dared to hope. "Welcome to our first meeting," Martha began, feeling like a teacher again. "The idea is simple: share stories, exchange ideas, rediscover the pleasure of reading together." The beginning was shy. Some participants clearly hadn't read the book, others barely remembered the story. But Helen had a special talent for asking questions that made everyone comfortable. "What did you think of Elizabeth? Does she remind you of anyone you knew in real life?" Gradually, the conversation flowed. Teresa talked about a youthful love that reminded her of the romance. Jack compared the era portrayed in the book with stories his grandfather used to tell. Anne, whom Martha discovered had been a librarian, made interesting observations about the historical context of the work. But it was Peter, a quiet gentleman who rarely spoke to anyone, who surprised them all. "You know," he said, his voice still weak but determined, "I also wrote stories when I was young. I never published anything, but I wrote short stories." A respectful silence settled in. Helen was the first to react. "How wonderful. Do you still remember any of them?" "I remember all of them," replied Peter with a shy smile. "I still write sometimes when I can't sleep." Martha felt a deep emotion. In a single afternoon, she had discovered that Anne was a librarian, that Peter was a writer, that each person there carried stories and talents that the daily routine of the home had made invisible. The meeting lasted 2 hours, much longer than planned. When they said goodbye, everyone seemed more animated, more alive. They agreed to read The Great Gatsby for the next meeting. "It was amazing," said Helen, as they organized the library. "Did you see how everyone's eyes sparkled when they started talking about their experiences?" "I did. It's as if each one had rediscovered a part of themselves." That night, Martha wrote in a notebook she had bought in the home's small shop. She hadn't written in years, but the words flowed naturally. She recorded the first meeting, the discoveries about each participant, the sensation of being alive again. From that day on, Friday became the most anticipated day of the week. The club grew. New participants arrived at each meeting, attracted by the positive buzz that spread through the corridors. Martha found herself planning the discussions, preparing questions, researching curiosities about the authors. It was during the 4th meeting, while discussing The Great Gatsby, that Helen made an unexpected revelation. They were debating jealousy and trust in relationships when she said almost casually, "I know well what it's like to question whether people really love us or if they're just fulfilling obligations." There was something in the way she spoke that caught Martha's attention. After the meeting, when they were alone organizing the books, Martha asked, "Helen, are you okay? You seem sad today." Helen sighed, sitting in the chair near the window. "Martha, can I tell you something, but promise it stays between us?" "Of course. I didn't come here because of accidents or falls. I don't have serious health problems. Helen paused, as if gathering courage. My family brought me here because they wanted to sell the house where I lived, a big valuable house that had belonged to the family for generations. Martha felt a chill in her stomach. What do you mean? My son and daughter-in-law argued that I didn't need such a big house, that it would be better for me to have professional care. But the truth is that they wanted the money from the sale to pay off debts and start a business. Tears began to roll down Helen's face. I signed the papers because I trusted them, because I believed they cared about me. Martha moved closer and held her friend's hand. Helen, that's terrible. Can't you do anything legally? The house has already been sold. The money has already been used. They've visited me 3 times since I arrived, always in a hurry, always with excuses. Helen wiped her eyes. You know what hurts the most, Martha? It's not even the house or the money. It's discovering that I wasn't worth more than a property to them. That night, Martha couldn't sleep. Helen's revelation deeply disturbed her. She had always known that there were different reasons for people to come to the home, but she had never thought that some could be so crude and self-interested. The next day, she observed Helen with different eyes. How could she maintain that positive energy, that genuine interest in others, carrying such a great pain? Where did she draw strength from to animate people when she herself had been so betrayed? The answer came a few days later, during a conversation in the courtyard. Martha, said Helen, watering her plants, I discovered that when we help others to flourish, we also flourish. I can't change what my family did, but I can choose how I'm going to live from now on. It was at that moment that Martha fully understood who Helen was. Not just a strong woman who had adapted well to the home, but someone who had transformed her pain into an instrument of healing for others. Someone who had chosen to be light amid darkness. This discovery gave Martha a new perspective on her own situation. Perhaps she too had been brought to the home more for the convenience of her family than for real necessity, but that didn't define who she was or what she could still do. At the 5th meeting of the club, Martha made an announcement. I would like to propose a new activity. How about if we created a small library of stories written by ourselves? Peter could share his short stories, others could write memories, poems. The idea was received with enthusiasm. Anne offered to organize the texts. Teresa said she would like to write about her years as a seamstress. Jack thought about recording his experiences as an engineer. And you, Martha? Asked Helen. What will you write? Martha smiled. I'm going to write about a woman who thought her life had ended at 73, but discovered that she was just beginning a new chapter. At that moment, looking around the library full of animated faces, of people who had rediscovered their voices and their stories, Martha realized something fundamental. She didn't need to leave the home to recover her dignity and identity. She just needed to remember that she still had much to offer the world, even if that world was smaller than before. The transformation wasn't happening just in her, but in everyone around her. And that, she discovered, was even more rewarding than any individual achievement she had reached in her previous life. 3 months after the first book club meeting, Hope Haven had become a different place. The corridors were no longer tunnels of silence, but spaces where conversations naturally sprouted. The courtyard, previously a place of obligatory passage, had turned into a meeting point. The library, which would go weeks without visitors, now buzzed with activity. Martha woke up that Monday in December with a strange feeling in her chest. It wasn't anxiety or sadness, but a restlessness she couldn't name. Helen had left the day before for a routine medical appointment and hadn't returned yet. It was the first time they had spent a night apart since becoming friends. During breakfast, Martha noticed that something was different, the staff whispered among themselves. There was a tension in the air that she couldn't decipher. Sylvia, the director, seemed more serious than usual. Jack, Martha asked, have you noticed anything strange today? Yes, I have. The staff are acting strangely, and did you see? There have been people in suits in the administration since early morning. Martha's heart accelerated. People in suits usually meant administrative problems or dissatisfied families. She immediately thought of Helen. Could it be possible that her family had discovered some irregularity in the papers she had signed? At lunchtime, Sylvia asked to speak with Martha privately. They headed to the administration office where 2 people were waiting, a well-dressed middle-aged woman and a younger man, both with serious expressions. Martha, these are Dr. Patricia and Dr. Charles from the Elder Rights Advocacy Office. explained Sylvia, visibly nervous. Martha felt her legs tremble. Did something happen to Helen? Dr. Patricia stepped forward. Ms. Martha, I don't know if you knew, but Helen Miller is not an ordinary resident. She is an investigative journalist, specializing in elder rights cases. The world seemed to spin around Martha. What? What do you mean? Helen was doing a report on nursing homes, specifically investigating complaints of emotional neglect and cases of families who institutionalize relatives for financial interest, continued the advocate. She infiltrated here to observe the situation up close. Martha let herself fall into the chair. Everything began to make sense in a painful way. Helen's inexplicable energy, her genuine interest in people, her ability to ask the right questions, to bring out the best in each person. So, she lied to me. To all of us? Martha's voice came out weaker than a whisper. Dr. Charles spoke with gentleness. Ms. Martha, Helen contacted us yesterday after her medical appointment. She very much wants to talk to you. In fact, she insisted that we come explain the situation in person. Where is she? At the hotel nearby. She didn't want to return without you knowing the truth. Martha felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and confusion. During all these months, had Helen lied about everything? About her family? About being abandoned? About being in the same situation as her? Will her report harm the home? The staff? Asked Martha, concerned about the people who had become her family. Actually, it's the opposite, replied Dr. Patricia. Helen was positively impressed with the changes she observed here. Initially, she came to investigate complaints of neglect, but found something completely different. What changes? The changes that you created, Ms. Martha. The book club, the library of personal stories, the reawakening of interest in life that she observed in the residents. Dr. Charles was smiling. Helen documented an extraordinary transformation. Sylvia, who until then had remained silent, added, Martha, Helen approached me last week. She said she wanted to include our experience as a positive example in her report. The work you developed will be presented as a model for other homes. Martha didn't know if she felt pride or if she was still processing the revelation about Helen. Can I talk to her? Of course. She's waiting. The meeting took place in the library, the place where everything had begun. Helen entered hesitantly, her eyes red from crying. For the first time since they had known each other, she seemed fragile, insecure. Martha, I know you must be feeling betrayed, Helen began before even sitting down, and you have every right to be. Why, Helen? Why did you lie about everything? Helen sat in the chair where she always sat during the club meetings. At the beginning, it was just work. I had received complaints about this home and came to investigate. The story about my family was a way to protect myself, to get information. And after, when we became friends, after that, everything changed. I fell in love with you all, with this place, with the transformation that was happening, but I didn't know how to tell the truth without destroying everything. Helen began to cry. Martha, everything I felt for you is real. Our friendship is real. What we built together is real. Martha remained silent for long minutes, observing Helen. The pain of betrayal was there, but there was also something else. The understanding that, regardless of the initial lies, Helen had genuinely cared about all of them. You really are a journalist? I am. I've been working for 20 years investigating cases of neglect against the elderly. I've seen terrible things, Martha. Families who completely abandon, homes where people are treated like objects. Helen dried her eyes. But here I saw the opposite. I saw people flourishing, rediscovering their identities, creating community. And your family? Did they really abandon you? Helen smiled sadly. My family is wonderful. I have 2 children who adore me, 3 grandchildren who visit me every week. When I decided to do this report, they were worried. My older son said it was dangerous, that I could get hurt emotionally. And did you get hurt? It hurt me to discover that I can hurt people I love because of my work. Martha stood up and walked to the window. Down below, she could see Peter watering the plants that Helen had taught him to care for. Teresa was sitting on the bench, animatedly talking with Anne. Jack was showing some calculations to another resident. Helen, what did you discover here that was so different from what you expected? I discovered that you didn't need saving. You just needed someone who believed you still had much to offer. Helen approached. You taught me that age doesn't diminish a person's value, that with opportunity and encouragement, anyone can be reborn. Martha turned to face Helen. And now, you'll leave and we'll never see each other again? That depends on you. My report comes out next week. After that, I would very much like to continue being your friend. Not as a resident, but as Helen herself, a retired journalist who learned important lessons about aging and dignity. At that moment, Martha understood something fundamental. Helen had lied about her personal situation, but had been absolutely truthful in everything else. The affection, the interest, the respect, the friendship, all of that was real. Helen, you hurt me with the lies, but you also gave me back my life. I don't know yet if I can forgive completely, but I know I don't want to lose you. The two embraced, crying. Through the window they could see other residents approaching the library, carrying books and notebooks. It was Friday, book club day. They're coming for the meeting, observed Helen. Our last meeting together as residents, said Martha. No, our first meeting as true friends. When the club members arrived, they found Martha and Helen organizing the chairs as always. The atmosphere was different, laden with emotion but also with hope. Everyone, announced Martha. Today, Helen is going to tell us a true story. The story of how a journalist discovered that sometimes, investigating one thing, we find something completely different and much more valuable. As Helen told her true story to the group, Martha observed the faces around. There was surprise, some tears, but mainly understanding. Everyone there knew what it was like to be underestimated, ignored, considered worthless. Everyone understood the need to prove that they still had much to offer. Peter was the first to speak when Helen finished. Helen, you gave us the greatest gift anyone can give, the chance to show who we really are. Teresa added, and we give you the greatest gift we have, our true friendship. That late afternoon, as the sun set through the foggy windows of the library, Martha understood that she had lived her greatest adventure, not the adventure of discovering secrets or unraveling lies, but the adventure of rediscovering herself. Helen continued visiting the home every Friday. Her report, published a month later, became a milestone in the discussion about dignity in old age. Hope Haven became a model for other institutions, but for Martha, the most important thing was discovering that it was possible to start again at 73, that true friendships could be born anywhere, and that she still had stories to write. On the last page of the notebook where she recorded the club meetings, Martha wrote, I discovered that aging is not about losing what we were, but discovering who we can still be. And sometimes the best discoveries come from the people we least expect. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that Martha and Helen's story has deeply touched your hearts. This narrative reminds us that dignity, friendship, and the ability to start over have no expiration date. To continue this emotional journey with us, we've prepared a special playlist with equally engaging stories about overcoming, friendship, and rediscovery. You can find it by clicking here on the left. If this story moved you as much as it moved us in creating it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity and beauty of human life. Don't miss our upcoming content and tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a new beginning like Martha's? We look forward to seeing you for our next story.